What if I told you that the very thing that makes you extraordinary is also the reason you often feel exhausted, misunderstood, and even broken? That's the paradox of being a true empath. Society praises sensitivity in theory, but in practice, most people dismiss it as weakness. Yet here's the hidden truth. Signs you are an empath aren't flaws. They are markers of a rare gift, one so powerful it can protect you from harm while simultaneously tearing you apart from the inside. Empath psychology reveals that this sensitivity is not random. It's wired deep into the unconscious mind, shaped by trauma, sharpened through the inner child's silent battles, and refined by the kind of shadow work Carl Jung described. And here's the kicker. While the world races to toughen up, true empaths carry the one thing everyone else secretly craves: the ability to feel what others can't. That's not fragility, that's power. Yet, power without balance can be dangerous. You'll see why this gift is both a shield and a weapon, a source of healing and destruction. It's what draws toxic people toward you like moths to a flame, and it's also what equips you to sense danger before it ever strikes. It's a double-edged sword, one that can either carve out your purpose or cut into your very soul. And that's where our journey begins, unpacking why the rare gift only true empaths carry is the very paradox that defines their lives. There's something extraordinary about the way true empaths move through life. While most people just walk into a room and notice the furniture, an empath notices the silence that lingers after an argument, the micro-expression that flashes across someone's face, or the way energy shifts when a toxic person enters. This isn't just intuition. It's a radar built from empath psychology itself. These signs you are an empath aren't always obvious to outsiders, but they are undeniable to those who carry the gift. It feels like tuning into a hidden radio frequency that no one else even knows exists. And once you start picking up those frequencies, you can't just switch them off. Imagine sitting with a friend who swears they are fine, yet deep down, you feel their pain as if it were yours. You hear the words "I'm okay," but you sense the cracks in the tone, the pause that says more than the speech. This ability to feel what's unsaid is something Jungian psychology might describe as tapping into the collective unconscious. It's not about magic. It's about the unconscious mind reading cues beneath the surface. And if you've ever wondered whether you carry this gift, taking an empath test often feels like just confirming what your heart already knew. But there's beauty in this heightened awareness. It allows empaths to build authentic connections, where conversations go beyond small talk and reach the soul. They don't just know what you're feeling, they live it with you. That's why many empaths become healers, teachers, or confidants. They are the ones people run to when the world feels too heavy. Carl Jung once suggested that synchronicity links us in ways beyond logic, and empaths seem to live in that space every day. Their life becomes a constant empath healing journey, where each connection deepens their purpose. Of course, this gift comes with irony. The very thing that allows empaths to understand others so profoundly often leaves them misunderstood. People might label them as too sensitive, not realizing that sensitivity is their superpower. Think about it. The ability to detect emotional boundaries being crossed before anyone else even notices. It's like a sixth sense. Analytical psychology would say it's not just sensitivity, it's individuation, the shaping of the self through the lens of others' truths. And that's why being an empath can feel both empowering and exhausting at the same time. Yet, this depth of perception often plants the seed for the struggles that follow. If you've ever felt drained after being around certain people, you already know how to deal with toxic people becomes not just advice but survival. The empath's rare gift is a double-edged sword. One side glimmers with insight, while the other threatens to cut deep. This tension between beauty and burden is what makes the empath experience unlike any other. And it's here, in this paradox, that the story truly begins to unfold. When an empath walks into a crowded space, it doesn't feel like just entering a room. It feels like being hit by waves from 100 invisible oceans at once. Every sigh, every hidden resentment, every unshed tear becomes part of their inner landscape. It's not just empathy, it's absorption. Empath psychology often shows that this is why empaths end up confused about where their feelings end and others begin. They can mistake someone else's anxiety for their own, carrying it long after the other person has already forgotten. It's a strange irony. Their gift of connection becomes their greatest thief of peace. The fatigue that follows can be overwhelming. Picture this. After spending an afternoon with a friend unloading their heartbreak, the empath returns home not only tired but carrying the grief as if it belonged to them. This is where trauma and empathy intertwine. The nervous system is wired to protect, yet ends up flooding the empath instead. Healing for empaths, then, isn't optional, it's essential. Without practices to clear the emotional residue, the empath's healing journey can feel like walking through mud, heavy and endless. And here's where boundaries come into play. Emotional boundaries are not just a nice idea, they are life-saving tools. Without them, the empath becomes a sponge that soaks up every toxic spill. Learning how to deal with toxic people isn't about cruelty or indifference, it's about survival. Imagine someone who leaves every conversation feeling like they've run a marathon they never signed up for. That's the hidden cost of carrying this rare gift. It protects, yes, but it also destroys if left unchecked. Carl Jung might argue that what we fail to integrate in ourselves we project onto others. For an empath, this can turn into a battlefield of projections, others unconsciously dumping their shadow into the empath's open heart. Shadow work becomes crucial here, because without it, the empath becomes a mirror reflecting everyone else's pain while forgetting their own reflection. It's like living in a house full of windows but with no walls to keep the storm out. And slowly, the empath's sense of self starts to erode. This erosion doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in, disguised as constant exhaustion, unexplained sadness, or the quiet dread of social situations. Over time, the empath may even begin to resent their own sensitivity, forgetting that it was once their rarest treasure. The gift begins to feel more like a curse, binding them to invisible chains. Yet within that struggle lies a deeper question. If this gift can weigh so heavily, is there a way to transform the burden into wisdom? That question leads us into the darker, more mysterious territory Jung himself called the shadow. Carl Jung once said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. For an empath, this statement hits harder than most people realize. Their rare sensitivity not only opens the door to beauty and connection, but also to the unconscious mind's darkest corners. In empath psychology, this is where the shadow archetype steps in, those repressed emotions and desires we refuse to admit, yet constantly project. Signs you are an empath often include this uncanny awareness of hidden motives, not only in others but, painfully, in themselves. Imagine being able to sense the bitterness in someone's voice, even when they are smiling. The empath perceives that shadow at play, jealousy, resentment, fear, and carries it like a secret no one else acknowledges. Jungian psychology explains this as the collective unconscious whispering through symbols and energies that bypass rational thought. For the empath, it's like walking through a crowded theater where everyone's shadow is performing backstage, and they are the only one who can hear the lines. No wonder they end up exhausted. It's a show they never bought tickets for. But here's the tricky part. Empaths themselves aren't immune to the shadow. Their own inner child and empath scars often merge, forming hidden doors that leak unacknowledged pain. Think about the child who grew up tiptoeing around an angry parent, learning to sense moods before words. That child becomes the adult empath who can feel a storm brewing in someone else's chest before the thunder even strikes. Trauma and empathy fuse, and suddenly their radar, once protective, becomes magnetic, drawing in people who replay the same chaos. Without shadow work, they may unconsciously choose relationships where they save others, hoping to rescue the parts of themselves still trapped in the past. It's a heartbreaking cycle. A healer who never notices their own wounds are still bleeding. Analytical psychology teaches us that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires embracing both light and dark. For an empath, This journey feels like balancing on a tightrope, open enough to feel others, but strong enough not to collapse under the weight of projections. The empath test might reveal their sensitivity, but it won't show the hidden battles they fight in silence. How to deal with toxic people becomes more than a skill. It becomes a way of not becoming toxic to themselves. And still, within this dance of shadow and light, synchronicity often appears. Have you noticed how empaths repeatedly meet the same type of person? It's rarely coincidence. Jungian psychology would call it the unconscious mind arranging encounters as teachers in disguise. The narcissist who drains them, the friend who manipulates, the lover who abandons, each one mirrors a fragment of the empath's integrated shadow. These painful meetings aren't punishments. They are invitations in the empath healing journey to reclaim the self that was once lost. It's as if life whispers, "Here's the wound you've ignored. Will you finally face it?" And the paradox deepens. The more an empath perceives the shadows around them, the stronger the call to confront the shadow within. Only then can individuation, becoming whole, truly begin. Many empaths don't realize that their gift often began as a survival skill. Picture a child in a house where tension hung in the air like smoke. Before a word was spoken, they already knew whether to hide, smile, or stay quiet. That child learned to scan every emotional shift, every glance, every unspoken cue. This hypervigilance was never just curiosity. It was protection. Years later, those same survival strategies appear as signs you are an empath, a rare sensitivity born not from peace, but from pain. Trauma and empathy are woven together like threads in the same fabric. When we speak of inner child and empaths, we are talking about wounds carried forward. The inner child remembers the slammed doors, the unpredictable moods, the silence that felt heavier than shouting. An empath test may reveal high scores in emotional awareness, but beneath the results lies the history that shaped them. Their nervous system grew like a finely tuned instrument, calibrated to notice danger before it struck. And while this once kept them safe, in adulthood it can blur emotional boundaries, making them feel responsible for everyone's mood. Think about how this plays out in real life. An empath in the workplace might sense their boss's irritation before the meeting even begins, adjusting their tone, their posture, their words just to keep the peace. Or in relationships, they might bend over backwards, carrying burdens that aren't theirs, just to avoid conflict. This constant adjusting isn't random. It's the legacy of childhood survival. Without awareness, the empath healing journey becomes a replay of old scripts, where love equals self-sacrifice and safety means disappearing into someone else's needs. Carl Jung's analytical psychology reminds us that what remains unhealed in the unconscious mind doesn't vanish. It directs our lives. That's why shadow work becomes essential for empaths. By facing the origins of their sensitivity, they begin to separate past wounds from present reality. Individuation is about reclaiming the self, saying, "This pain shaped me, but it doesn't define me anymore." The empath who learns to honor their trauma without becoming trapped in it finds freedom on the other side. Healing for empaths begins not with denial, but with radical honesty. And here's where synchronicity often surprises them. Just when an empath feels ready to grow, life tends to bring mentors, books, or even strangers whose stories mirror their own. These encounters aren't coincidences. They are invitations to step deeper into the empath psychology journey. Suddenly, the pain that once felt meaningless begins to reveal purpose. Trauma, when faced, becomes the soil where wisdom grows. But of course, even wisdom has two sides, and this gift, when balanced, doesn't only come with scars. It also serves as protection against hidden dangers. One of the most overlooked strengths of empaths is their built-in radar for danger. While others walk blindly into conversations or relationships, empaths sense the subtle tremors before the earthquake hits. A fake smile, a sudden drop in tone, or the tension no one else notices. All of these serve as early warning signs. Empath psychology shows that this sensitivity, when embraced, is not just a burden but a shield. These signs you are an empath aren't only about suffering, they are about survival. What once felt like a curse often turns out to be the very tool that keeps them safe. Imagine sitting across from someone who seems kind, but deep down something feels off. An empath doesn't need evidence. Their unconscious mind catches microsignals others miss. Carl Jung would call this tapping into the collective unconscious, a knowledge that bypasses logic. This is why many empaths avoid certain people or situations without being able to explain why. It's not paranoia, it's protection. And often, that instinct proves right. This kind of intuitive armor is part of the empath healing journey. It teaches them to trust the signals they once doubted. This protective side also helps when learning how to deal with toxic people. Instead of waiting until the damage is done, empaths often sense manipulation in its earliest stages. It could be the way someone asks for help without ever offering support, or the way a conversation leaves them drained rather than inspired. Recognizing these patterns allows the empath to set emotional boundaries before they are consumed. And here's the lesson: protection doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means walking away before the storm breaks. Of course, protection extends beyond relationships. Empaths often use their gift to avoid environments that harm their well-being. A crowded bar filled with tension, a workplace buzzing with unspoken hostility, even a movie that carries too much violence, all can trigger deep discomfort. By respecting these signals, they choose spaces that nurture rather than deplete them. Analytical psychology frames this as individuation, the ability to align with what strengthens the self instead of what erodes it. Healing for empaths isn't just about defense. It's about wise selection of what they allow into their world. And here's the paradox: while this protective radar guards them from harm, it can also become overwhelming. Living constantly on alert is exhausting, like carrying a shield that never drops. Over time, the very mechanism that protects can also devour their energy. This is where the gift begins to reveal its darker side, reminding us that every strength has a shadow. And so, the empath's shield may slowly transform into a weight, and what once safeguarded them can just as easily destroy them. For every empath who learns to use their gift as protection, there comes a moment when the same sensitivity begins to consume them. What once acted as a radar now feels like a constant alarm, ringing even when no danger is present. This emotional overload leads to exhaustion, as if their nervous system never gets to rest. Empath psychology reveals that prolonged exposure to other people's emotions can trick the unconscious mind into believing their pain is personal. And so, the empath becomes both healer and victim, carrying burdens that don't belong to them. Think of it like standing under a waterfall that never stops. At first, the flow feels refreshing, life-giving even. But after hours, days, and years, the weight of that water crushes you. This is what emotional boundaries are meant to prevent. Without them, empaths fall into cycles of burnout, insomnia, and even physical illness. The empath healing journey is often filled with moments of collapse, where the body finally demands what the mind refused to acknowledge. And unless addressed, these collapses become recurring. Relationships add another layer to the destruction. Because empaths attract those in need, they often find themselves paired with partners who take more than they give. Carl Jung's concept of shadow explains why, unconsciously, they are drawn to people who embody their unhealed wounds. The narcissist finds the empath irresistible because the empath will give endlessly. And the empath, believing they can heal, stays long after the damage has begun. Shadow work is crucial here, or else the cycle repeats endlessly, draining the empath's spirit. Even outside of relationships, the destruction shows up in subtle ways. They might avoid social gatherings, not because they dislike people, but because they can't handle the noise of emotions crashing like waves. They might isolate, confuse loneliness with safety, and slowly disconnect from the very world they long to heal. Analytical psychology would say this is individuation gone astray, the self-fragmenting instead of integrating. The empath test can't measure this kind of silent suffering. It's hidden beneath smiles and "I'm fine" responses, yet it erodes them daily. And yet, within this destructive spiral lies a clue. The very excess that breaks them also points to what they must learn. How to deal with toxic people is not just external advice. It's an internal practice. Healing for empaths begins when they realize their gift needs balance, not denial. The paradox deepens. Their destruction is also their doorway. And if there's a path into this chaos, there must also be a path out, a way to transform this consuming fire into steady light. Which brings us into the most vital part of the journey, the search for equilibrium. Equilibrium for empaths isn't about shutting off their gift. It's about learning to master it. Think of it like taming fire. Left wild, it destroys everything in its path. Contained, it warms, protects, and gives light. The same is true with empath psychology. This sensitivity doesn't have to consume them. Instead, it can be harnessed through conscious practices that strengthen emotional boundaries. The empath healing journey is less about fixing something broken and more about refining a rare gift into something sustainable, something that fuels growth instead of draining it. One of the most practical steps is setting boundaries without guilt. For many empaths, saying no feels like betrayal, yet saying yes too often leads to resentment and burnout. Here's an example. If a friend always calls late at night to unload their problems, the empath can kindly suggest a different time, or even decline. It's not cruelty, it's self-preservation. Learning how to deal with toxic people isn't just about confrontation, it's about selective generosity. By choosing where to pour their energy, empaths reclaim control over their lives. Carl Jung's idea of individuation becomes a guiding light here. Balance requires integrating both light and shadow, strength and vulnerability. Shadow work allows empaths to face their own wounds so they are no longer hijacked by them in relationships. Imagine journaling not just to vent, but to dialogue with the unconscious mind, uncovering patterns and projections. Analytical psychology reminds us that wholeness isn't perfection, it's acceptance. By befriending their shadow, empaths stop repeating destructive cycles and begin creating from a place of power. Practical tools matter. 2. Meditation helps empaths quiet the noise, reconnecting with their own center. Grounding exercises, like walking barefoot on grass, mindful breathing, or even creative practices such as painting, restore balance. Reading books like The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron or diving into Jung's own work on synchronicity offers both validation and depth. These aren't luxuries. They are essentials for healing for empaths. When consistently applied, they transform sensitivity from chaos into clarity. And then comes the paradox that closes the circle. The very gift that once threatened to destroy them becomes their greatest strength. Signs you are an empath stop feeling like burdens and start feeling like treasures. They begin to sense not only the pain of others but also their beauty, their resilience, their unspoken hope. Equilibrium is not about becoming less. It's about becoming whole. And yet, this balance isn't a final destination. It's an ongoing practice, a lifelong dance between absorbing and releasing, protecting and connecting. Which leads us to reflect on the rare gift itself, the paradox that it both protects and destroys, depending on how it is carried. So here's the question: what will you do with this rare gift? Will you keep letting it drain you, or will you finally learn how to carry it with strength, with balance, with wisdom? Because the truth is, sensitivity doesn't have to mean suffering. It can mean clarity, protection, and power. Healing for empaths begins the moment you stop apologizing for who you are and start shaping boundaries that honor your worth. Ask yourself, how many times have you felt exhausted because you carried emotions that weren't yours? How many times have you silenced your instincts, only to regret it later? And how much longer will you allow toxic people to define your energy, when deep down you already know how to deal with them? The answers to these questions determine whether your gift will protect you or destroy you. But here's the beauty: every empath has the power to rewrite the script. Through shadow work, individuation, and the daily practice of self-awareness psychology, you can transform this double-edged sword into a tool of wisdom. The unconscious mind may test you, but synchronicity will also guide you toward the people, the lessons, and the healing you need most. You are not cursed. You are chosen to see what others cannot. Now it's your turn. Share in the comments. What part of this journey spoke to you the most? Do you feel the weight of this gift more as protection or as destruction? I want to hear your story, because your words may be the synchronicity another empath needs today. And if this message resonated with you, don't just walk away. Subscribe to Hidden Mind, activate the notifications, and stay close. Because this is only the beginning of what you can discover about yourself, your gift, and the hidden layers of the human soul.